Yeah, our next speaker here is Leora Katz, who is also probably the reason I'm a product manager today. She was the director of product at Checkout 51.
I
She
didn't
was
know
director of
that.
product at Checkout 51, where and gave me my first product job. She worked at Post Media Labs running experiments for different ways for the media engage with its users. And now probably, theScore has lots of scale, but I think Leora's scale now outshines everyone here. She's a product manager at BuzzFeed, based in LA, so she doesn't have to deal with 6 months of winter anymore. So that's nice for you. Yeah, welcome, Leora. Thank you.
I have to deal with other things being in this country, so don't be too jealous.
Fair enough. Maybe let's just kick off with starting with a little bit about what you are working on at BuzzFeed, and then we can go from there.
Okay, cool. So I've done a bunch of different things at BuzzFeed. I've been on many teams. When I first started, I was working on internal tools. So I was helping video producers package their videos and assets and metadata for distribution to social platforms. Then I started working on the video experience on BuzzFeed.com and in our apps. From there, I worked on BuzzFeed.com as a whole, and now I work on the commerce team. So since the end of February, I've been focused on our shopping and affiliate content on BuzzFeed.com.
Awesome. Can you tell me about something? I'll do a similar question than when we asked Corey. Something that you launched and worked on, and like how you decided that was going to be the thing that you worked on.
Yeah. So in preparing for this, the tool that I decided to chat about is something that we built at BuzzFeed called Lingo. So this is going back to 2018. And it's when I was on a team where we were focused on internal tools, helping our video producers. And we were approached by some of our business stakeholders with a new side project to consider. They wanted to know if we could help them speed up the video translation process. So strategically, it made a lot of sense, because you already spend so much money to create and produce a video. And if you can just translate it, you can kind of like unlock all this extra potential for views and for revenue. It sounds great, but like as a product manager, it's also an extremely overwhelming task when you know nothing about that space. And it's like, we all probably can recognize that translations are hard, and video translations even harder than pure text translations. So yeah, we ended up, a small team kind of broke out from our overall squad, and we just started to dig deep into what the issues were and what the team needed. And we ended up building a very cool tool called Lingo.
That's super cool. So when you're like, especially working on something like that, you're obviously, like I said, working with scale that, most people don't see. So like you said, when you're unlocking, a video, like, that could just mean like a buttload of money in revenue, that video would unlock. How does that impact like the decision making when it comes to like either large decisions like a translation or something smaller? How do you determine, do you run tests, or like, again, how do you determine what you put out there when the impact is so large?
So it's totally different if we're working on internal tools or external tools, because obviously if it's internal tools, then you're actually, even though it's BuzzFeed and you know that there's millions and millions of viewers, you're just talking about like the people at your company who are going to be using the product. So that sort of shifts things. But yeah, when it
still probably a couple thousand people.
Yeah, it can be a couple. Well, not quite. But either way, like any internal tooling, you're building it to facilitate something larger. So at the end of the day, the higher strategic goals are not just to like build a great workflow tool. It's to build a great workflow tool because you want to unlock these like huge budgets or huge viewerships or whatever. But when it comes to building like the externally facing, user facing products, then yeah, we do a ton of A/B testing, and validating to make sure that what we're building is right. And, sort of unlike Matt was just talking about, we don't have an issue where like we can't learn fast, right? Like if we put something out and right away have like millions of people seeing it. So, it's pretty easy to pretty quickly see if something is working or not.
Do you use tooling for the A/B testing, or is that an internal as well?
Yeah, we built, there is a tool at BuzzFeed that was built in-house to help manage A/B tests, especially because we can often have multiple going on the site at the same time. So just to help cohort users and bucket users and make sure that my test doesn't run into like another product manager's tests. So we do have tooling for that.
And then, like after you release something, again, the question comes down like, how is this performing? How is this doing? How did you know this was the right thing to do? What do you look at to measure that? And then further to that, what do you look at to say, okay, what's the next version of this?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and something that I've also like screwed up many times in my career, as I'm sure everyone here has. But one thing that I've started to do that in the last couple of years that's really, really helpful is before I even start working with engineers on a project is coming up with like a list of data questions that I know I'm going to have once the thing is live. So simply like opening up a Google Doc and typing like, what am I going to want to know? And it's just like a like long list, like from your head of the types of questions you know you're going to have once this thing launches. And then I'll take that to a data partner, whether it's somebody who's like embedded in the team or just someone at the company, and really walk through to make sure that once we launch, we'll have access to that data. Because that is, I think, where a lot of problems can kind of arise, where like you think you're automatically going to be getting some like data for free, and then you launch your tool and it's not there. So yeah, I work really closely with our data partners to make sure that like from the outset, we're getting our tracking in place. And then in terms of pulling those numbers later, it depends on the team. It depends on the project. We have a lot of tools that we use. We use Mode for dashboards. We also use Looker for dashboards, and for more like customized views where we can kind of like go in and play around. And then we also sometimes will do custom data pulls where either an engineer on the team or one of our data partners can go in and pull results for us.
And then what do you do to when you're data to say, okay, here's what we're going to tackle next?
A lot of the times I'll kind of find that, like, so when you're first working on a project, like you've probably already stripped it back quite a bit. Like you probably in your mind have like all these grand, beautiful visions of what this thing can look like one day. And then as you start like scaling it back, you like are crossing off all these things you want to build. So one thing that's kind of helpful is that like right from the start, you probably already have that like backlog wish list of things you want to build. And I will just sort of look at the data and see if our assumptions were right or wrong, and then be able to kind of like add in some of the features that we were thinking about that might make sense. On the flip side, you could find that like, oops, this thing's not really working and people aren't using it the way you thought you would. And you might end up like not building any of the things that you wanted to build. So
in which case, like, good job for MVPing.
Totally. Another lesson that I have learned like the hard way, and I'm sure, again, like everyone on this call has.
Actually, yeah. Is there a time that you've gone in a laundry list of, backlog items that you had to cut, once you got in there, talking to whether it was, time or scope or resources that you have available to you, and then you've launched it, and then your assumptions were totally wrong, but you keep going, but just on different things, like whether it's through user feedback that you've seen.
Interesting.
That's just changed your mind.
I can't think off the top of my head of one where we just sort of like pivoted the idea completely. But there are tons of examples that I have of where, including the tool that I mentioned at the beginning for video translations, where we had all these great ideas. We stripped it back as much as we could, and we had all these great ideas for what like the next versions were going to be. And then sometimes it's not even that like your users don't use it the way you think they will, but like sometimes company strategy changes, or like the times we're living in now, like the entire world changes. And like those sorts of things also can just like totally throw a wrench in your roadmaps. So So I have lots of examples of where it's even just something like that, like your company's strategy shifts and you have to change everything that you've already been building and like perhaps not build them anymore or keep them at their MVP instead of making them into like the beautiful things you wanted them to be. Yeah.
Like, what is it like to build an MVP when you have an audience of like millions and millions of people? Like, I imagine that, you know, if you're building an MVP and you're a startup and it's like you're just trying to get something to market, different than BuzzFeed building an MVP.
Yeah. Yeah, the pressure is definitely there because you know that millions of people are going to see it. Something that we're working through right now on a project that I want to put like a really lightweight test out for something is just being really clear to our users that it is an MVP. So making sure that like we include that little text that says like beta or like you're helping us learn something or like we promise this will be better. This is just our first test at it. So that can be helpful, just like being straight up with your users that it's like still in testing mode.
Yeah. Is there like, what do you use to get that feedback from you? Like, I imagine that your user base is very vocal, but are there organized ways of getting that information that you use from them?
Yeah, we have a group of people called Buzz Keepers, which are like our super hardcore users. Actually, it's a combination of hardcore users and people who don't use it as much, but we have a research team that can help us get access to them when we have questions or want feedback. But like we also have comments on the bottom of our posts. So if we put something in like a BuzzFeed post, like a new feature or whatever, like we'll probably hear about it in the comments section too.
Like I said, they have lots of ways to talk to you.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
they do.
Yeah. All right. Again, I think this 15 minutes just flew by.
That went really fast.
It did. So I think, yeah, we're going to bring it back for Q&A. I'm actually going to go join Matt, so we'll be together, and then I will see you guys shortly.